choice. Every choice in your life has led you here. To this moment. To this place.
Jacob, there might be a way out after all. But I'm going to need your help.
Welcome to Black Iron Prison.
The Callisto Protocol got a mixed response when it initially came out. However, it didn't stop them from bringing in new content for players as much as they could. Mostly free content, which took me by surprise. Whether it was new modes, new game plus, and new skins, some not as well received as others. But now, 6 months later, we finally have our first and possibly only story DLC for the game, the Final Transmission. And it just so happens to be announced days before I posted my initial video on the Callisto Protocol. So now I am back once again to bring to you something new. I originally wanted to come back to talk about the DLC as a quick follow-up type series. So in such convenient timing, I am back to do so. Before it initially came out, however, I went to see what the initial response was to the DLC from those who played it early. Sure enough, it's about as mixed as the base game. Some of you have gone on record to say that it feels completely pointless. With this in mind, much like the base game, I went into this DLC with more of an open mind. After playing the full 2-hour experience and being able to as much as I possibly can, it's safe to say I'm satisfied, but also conflicted. On one hand, the things I wanted out of it, I got. It does everything right that the base game does and then some. However, everything it does wrong is also present in a sense. Like, most of my criticisms were answered, but also not answered. It's honestly hard to explain without going into the full details, so here is a full disclosure that this entire video will be containing spoilers for this DLC, as I will also be talking about the story. So if you don't want to be spoiled, I'd recommend going to my original love letter to Callisto Protocol for the full context, as I do talk about the story in detail there as well. Link will be in the description below. Otherwise, expect spoilers throughout this entire video. With all that being said, however, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Without further ado, this is my postscript for the Callisto Protocol Final Transmission. It begins right where that atrocious ending leaves off, with you waking up to sound of Caitlin Mahler helping you return back to learn where, as mentioned before, she found a way for him to escape. She explains how there is an escape ship at the hangar bay, but along the way there's data drives that need to be collected scattered around what's left of this prison, that contains the rest of the evidence of Cole's intentions. You only gave Danny a piece of the puzzle, being the original attack on the Europa, but collect the rest of the drives and you can expose Cole once and for all. One last job. That's all it is. So your main mission is to collect the rest of the data and escape this collapsing prison. As you continue to push through the prison, however, we see that more and more of Jacob's mental state gets worse and worse. His hallucinations fundamentally change how the game plays in sometimes. Not by a large margin, but it's really great to see them focus on the psychological aspects of the character that was touched on just a bit in the base game. Speaking of, let's take a bit of a detour and talk about the gameplay of the Final Transmission, as they add new stuff to the overall gameplay loop, and they just somehow manage to work for both the better and also for the worse. Level design, as usual, is absolutely superb. The interconnectivity of it all is incredible, and the new added buzzsaws on the walls scattered around the prison can be used against the biophage, which is really fun to do. There's even some fun little traps inside the vents as well, as you crawl into them. They even added a new little puzzle that you do over the course of the DLC. Now, I'll be real at first. I initially thought that these were some of the worst puzzles I've ever played, and they just overall frustrated me to no end. However, the more I continued to do these puzzles, the better it gets, and the more I realized I was playing it completely wrong. Some of the parts of the lock will move on their own, so they will require precise timing so that way you can do them correctly in a rapid pace. Once you figure that out, I seem to enjoy them more and more over time the more I did it. Overall, level design is still absolutely top notch, and that's something I will always give credit to when it comes to the overall game. Next, we have the new enemy type, the Biobot. Let me start off by saying the designs for these guys are fantastic. Their movements are very animalistic, and they are uber aggressive, and also have an electric shockwave attack that'll push you back off of them as well as they charge towards you if you're too far away. They're a fun encounter more often than not. Next, we have the new weapon, the Kinetic Hammer. It follows the same gameplay formula as much as the stun baton or the pickaxe that you get throughout the game, but it's a really powerful and really good weapon when going up against the Biobots. It even has a unique ability to create a powerful AoE that wipes out hordes of biophage. Honestly though, if they add this to the Riot mode, that would be fucking awesome. It's a fun addition and an overall good weapon. Unfortunately though, this is where the majority of my praises for the gameplay starts to fade, as while everything I love about the gameplay, everything I dislike also is there in some way, shape, or form. Lack of melee weapon variety is still incredibly present here. The majority of the game is still using the stun baton until you are able to get the kinetic hammer. But before you even get the kinetic hammer, your stun baton gets broken, so you only use the kinetic hammer.
What? What the fuck?
Like, for fuck's sake, just let me use both. I know I'm harping on this, but newer weapons on top of the ones that we already have wouldn't kill them. But then again, given how powerful this hammer actually is against smaller biophage, yeah, I'll just stick with the hammer. Another thing I come to notice is that enemy encounters on certain occasions are somehow worse than they normally are. For whatever reason, certain enemy encounters have this weird tendency to throw everything at you without any ounce of time to take a breath. Probably the worst offender of this is that you walk into a room filled with corruptors, and on the hardest difficulty, corruptors can kill you in 1 or 2 hits. I tried doing this in several different ways, but it just doesn't really matter. You die, die, die. I know some of these sections are few and far between, but in a 2-hour DLC, they become extremely noticeable and worthy of criticism. But anyways, as that's the majority of my gameplay impressions as a whole, it's time to get back into the story. As you go further and further down the prison and into the factory, and collect all the rest of the data drives, you meet Kaylin Mahler, weirdly, in the factory. And,
Doing here?
The ship's close, we just have to reach the loading bay.
Watch out! Oh my god!
yeah, she's gone. But this also perplexes Jacob as he wonders why she isn't on the ship. After you go down further and further, you start seeing writing on the walls and the voices in your head start to get worse. Then, as you reach the loading bay? You walk into a room where he comes across Caitlin Mahler and...
What the hell? You'll never escape.
well, shit. We then face off against an actually pretty fun boss fight. The design looks similar to the two-headed brutes, but the gameplay changes are super noticeable, where she can teleport and she can even split up her body to shoot molten projectiles out of her chest. It's honestly a pretty good boss fight. Better than the boss fight with Ferris, in my opinion. You finally take out Mahler and she goes down in a fiery grave. But wait a minute. Mahler is still trying to contact you, and tells you to hurry. Then wait. You then walk into what looks like your ship? Jacob looks audibly confused, but then we get this cutscene to end it off of.
Come on!
Almost there.
Final report, Dr. Caitlin Marler. I found him in the Warden's Tower and dragged him here. His link to Danny's core still active. I used this connection to upload the full details of the experiment. Whether it will be received, I can't say. But it was our only hope to get the truth out there. To turn his sacrifice into opportunity.
Data transfer complete.
Finally. Jacob, you did it. And now, your fight is done.
That's right. Jacob was dead this whole time. All the hallucinations, all the visions, it was all in your head. And with the data transfer finally complete, Danny now has all evidence she needs to stop Cole. So, this is the part where I was the most conflicted, because on one hand, I am satisfied with this ending. It felt like actual closure for Jacob as a character, which was all I ever wanted out of it. Plus it all adds up. The visions, the trauma, the data drives. It was all to get that last bit of data that Mahler needed to finally put a stop to Cole. She picked at your brain, and when the job was done, she and Jacob died along with the prison. One last job. However, at the same time, this honestly didn't need to be DLC at all. This honestly could have been worked into the base game, and we would have gotten a pretty divisive but decent ending. A part of me feels like they gated this off as DLC due to public reception about the game when it initially released, and it clearly shows, which is honestly upsetting. But for what it's worth, I'm satisfied. What I wanted out of it, I got, and that's good enough for me. But I can't help but feel that the game would have benefited more having this ending in the base game. In fact, in my opinion, the best ending should have been this. After you launch Danny and help her escape, as the credits roll, you fight off against swarms and swarms of biophage as much as you possibly can with what you are given. And when you finally get close to death, you then get the final cutscene where Jacob dies as the prison goes with him. Much like, say, the Lone Wolf mission in Halo Reach. His sacrifice would matter all the same. All in all, though, the ending, I say, works for what it's trying to accomplish, and it brings the conclusion that Jacob's character needed. However, a part of me definitely feels wanting more. And honestly, that's my opinion on this DLC as a whole. I'm satisfied, but left with wanting more. This feels like it was cut out from the base game last minute, and it clearly shows. Most of the stuff in this DLC definitely could have been worked into the actual game, and it would have gotten a much better reception that way. Some people have even gone on record to say that it feels like abandoning an IP, and honestly, I can't blame them. Do I think the ending is just striking distance abandoning the IP? No. No, I don't. But I'm still optimistic in some way. And from what it looks like, so is striking distance. Furthermore, shown in the most recent AMA on Reddit they did. While sales wasn't great, Glenn has gone on record to say that he was happy with what was put out and how he was able to create his vision. And they even did seem to hint at that a potential sequel with Danny could still definitely happen, which gives me a lot of hope. They definitely look like they want to continue this IP further in some way, which is great. But that's all up in the air for now. Whatever happens with the IP from here on out is up to Glenn Schofield, and where he wants to continue Callisto Protocol in the future. If they choose not to, I'll be fine with it. It will suck, but I'll be fine with how it ends here. Whether or not they choose to, though, only time will tell. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my postscript for the Callisto Protocol final transmission. Thank you all so much for watching. I know it's a bit different than what I normally do, but I definitely want to keep making content like this in the near future, as it's honestly always nice to go back to games that I love. I mean, I already know I'm going to be back when the Elden Ring DLC comes out. So if you guys like to see more of this, leave a comment down below, and make sure to subscribe for more stuff like this. I had fun talking about this game, and I can't wait for what else I have planned for you all. But all while that's going on, I want to send you guys over to K-Huck. I recently was on a live stream with her where she got to interview yours truly. Go show some love and support. Alright, that's all for now. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.